Hello and welcome to another standard video. Today we're checking out this blue-red artifact deck that has access to a very unique win condition involving a Radiant Lotus, a 6-mana artifact that can tap, sacrifice one or more artifacts, and then make 3 mana of the chosen color for each one of those sacrificed artifacts. So that can give us a lot of mana in a deck that's filled to the brim with artifacts, and then the eventual way to take out the opponent involves Boom Mobile, which can exhaust for 2 in a red, dealing X damage to any target, so that can target our opponent directly to hopefully win the game after generating enough mana. Boom Mobile authorizes a vehicle that when it enters makes 4 mana of any one color that we can spend only to activate abilities, and there's a lot of activated abilities throughout the deck. Of course, the Boom Mobile's own exhaust ability, but then we also get to play with Repurposing Bay, which is often how we're going to assemble all these different combo pieces. Can pay 2 mana, tap it, sacrifice an artifact to search our library for an artifact that's 1 more expensive and put it straight onto the battlefield. So we often don't mind sacrificing a Boom Mobile to then get the Might Stone and Weak Stone at 5 mana, which when it enters can draw 2 or give a creature -5/-5. Also makes 2 colorless mana that we can spend to cast artifacts or activate abilities. So it also pays for a Repurposing Bay activation, so we can sack our Might Stone to get a Radiant Lotus. And then eventually what we would really want is a crafted Enigma Jewel, so we can play this early as something that makes 2 colorless mana only to activate abilities, so it's a bit different from the Might Stone and Weak Stone since it doesn't cast artifacts, but we can still activate it to draw cards with Mace Might Tome, eventually gaining 4 life. Collector's Vault can help us draw and discard, making treasure tokens in the process, and even a Legion Extruder could help us make additional 3/3 Golem tokens. And then of course there's the Repurposing Bay, which will also benefit from the Enigma Jewel. And then we eventually want to craft with 4 or more non-lands with activated abilities, and it also costs a whopping 9 mana, so it's quite pricey, but of course we can tap it for 2 mana, so that can also contribute towards its own activation. And we can craft with things that are already in the graveyard, so that's where the combo with Radiant Lotus is so powerful. We can have the Lotus in play, sacrifice a bunch of artifacts, including the Lotus itself. Hopefully we also have a Boom Mobile in play that we can sacrifice, or maybe we've discarded one earlier. And then we have now a whole bunch of mana from the Lotus, use it to craft Locus of Enlightenment, which will exile those 4 cards with activated abilities, including Boom Mobile and Radiant Lotus. And then now when we go to activate our abilities, those abilities will get copied, and that way we can double the mana we can generate from our Radiant Lotus. We just sacrifice a couple artifacts we have left, double the mana, and then with all that mana we can burn the opponent out with the exhaust from Boom Mobile, which also gets doubled by our Locus of Enlightenment. So that's the combo kill. That's pretty convoluted, but hopefully we'll get to see it in action and it will all make sense. And then rounding out the deck, there's Torture Tower to deal with aggressive creatures, can also bargain it by sacrificing an artifact to deal 3 and scry 1. Then we've got Chainsaw as an artifact that can enter dealing 3 to a creature, and a Legion Extruder deals 2 to any target when it enters, but also has a useful activated ability since we're not equipping the Chainsaw very often. And then we've got our card draw artifacts at 3 mana, the Repurposing Bay, and then of course you can't play an artifact deck in Standard without Simulacrum Synthesizer, which is often going to be our win condition if we can't assemble the Lotus combo, making lots of construct tokens whenever we cast expensive artifacts. Thran Spider can also help us make more mana with a Power Stone, so that can also ramp out some of our 5 mana artifacts, and also has a nice activated ability, so it can also be crafted with the Enigma Jewel if we're just looking for 4 things to exile. And then at 4 mana we've got a Sweeper with Ill-Timed Explosion, can potentially deal 9 damage to all creatures if we discard a Skitterbeam Battalion. So this is a 9 mana card when it's in our hands and when we discard it, but can also be prototyped for just 5 mana, in which case we get to make 3 2/2 creatures with Trample and Haste, and each one of those creatures also triggers Simulacrum Synthesizer. So if we have 1 Synthesizer in play and cast our Battalion, we'll end up with 3 construct tokens, and of course our 3 2/2 creatures, so all those constructs are going to be huge, so that can represent a lot of damage. And then if we prototype the Battalion, it also counts as a 5 mana card on the battlefield that we can sacrifice to Repurposing Bay to get our Radiant Lotus. But the reverse isn't true. Battalion is only a 9 mana card in our library, so we cannot sacrifice a Boom Mobile to search it up, but wouldn't be the best card to find anyways. And then our mana base also has access to a Fomori Vault, which can be useful in assembling some of our combo pieces, and then lots lots of blue-red dual lands, including a couple Thundering Falls to surveil, and then we also finally have the blue-red Verge land, which can also give us some good mana fixing. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the play with a keepable hand. We'll need to find land 3. So that's what we're surveilling into. Explosion's tempting, but lands are more important. Got a little bit of interaction with the extruder. And I'll prioritize my 3 drops on curve. Against blue-white, against Oculus, Torture Tower's not particularly effective. Against control, also doesn't hit much. So I feel okay putting that in the graveyard. And then we could try and cast Synthesizer if our opponent keeps up a potential counter spell. Maybe give them a repurposing bay instead. Alright, opponent's playing green as well for a high noon. So it could be some sort of Overlord deck still. And then we're just looking for lanes. So it can only cast 1 spell each turn, although it can still Torture Tower in the opponent's turn or activate our abilities. Soul Partition hits our Synthesizer, so then just casting a repurposing bay here. So yeah, not entirely sure what to expect. If we get to untap, we could play Extruder, sack it to the bay to get a 3-drop. Now I could just cast Mightstone and Weakstone and get a Lotus after sacking it. Could also cast Synthesizer again. And then that into Battalion is quite strong in and of itself. Sure. Opponent seems to be keeping up interaction anyway. Get this Cry 2 once again. And Soul Partition hits Synthesizer once more. Don't need Collector's Vaults. Even though it could maybe discard a Torture Tower, that's not doing much for us. So the game continues. And now Beza gets to draw a card. Not the end of the world. So sure, we could just replay Synthesizer for a 3rd time. Could also Mightstone take out Beza, get Lotus, and then we're looking for Boommobile and Enigma Jewel still to really set up something powerful. I think it's still more straightforward to play Synthesizer and then set up Battalion next turn. So then Thran Spider, still an okay draw since it triggers our Synthesizer can be sacrificed to repurposing bay. Probably don't need more lands afterwards. And Beza hits for 4. And there's a Beanstalk. So possible they're playing Leyline Binding as well, which can still hit our artifacts. And they might cast one before we trigger Synthesizer. So, interesting spot. If their plan is to cast a Binding, then I guess this can only be activated as a sorcery. So yeah, Battalion still makes some amount of sense. Opponent might have a Sweeper, but then the game goes on. Or we can Thran Spider, get Boommobile, which I don't hate. And then having 1 construct means that we can potentially grow it with Battalion next turn and get something a bit more impactful. Could also sack the Power Stone to get Enigma Jewel, which also makes sense. And then next turn get Boommobile, and then I can use the mana to maybe activate some other ability. And there's a Overlord for 3 mana. So now a Leyline Binding can cost a single white. And this is the type of matchup where setting up the combo can be useful, since our opponent might have lots of board wipes to keep our creatures in check. Alright, so how do we feel about Battalion? Trigger Synthesizer a bunch, and then potentially sacrifice Thran Spider to get a Boommobile. Yeah, that could work out. So maybe I'll start there. Play Skitter Beam. Could exhaust a Boomobile. Which would just deal 2 damage here. So not that impressive. So I'll just go to attackers. Smash. Opponent probably chumps with Beza, takes 6, and then next turn casts a sweeper. But that's alright. Just gotta hope they don't also have a Leyline Binding to interact in my turn. Soul Partition their own High Noon, so they can cast more spells. Beanstalk, okay. So they're maybe digging for answers. And an Overlord, so at most they can still play 1 Leyline Binding, which I don't think is saving them here. And our opponent explodes, alright, I guess the constructs get it done. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. Hand is keepable. With Enigma Jewel setting up our Mace Mind Tome. Can play turn 1. Up against black, so it could be the Demon deck. So finding ill-timed explosion's nice, as that can help us deal with larger threats. Okay, so we're off to a decent start. Still nothing from our opponents, so if their hand is all creature removal, we're pretty happy. And a Boomobile can also help activate cards like Mace Mind Tome. For now, I guess we'll draw maybe before we play a land in case we draw a 3-drop. Like a Repurposing Bay. Alright, so we're definitely assembling a lot of the pieces we need to set up the Lotus combo. Mindstone can be sacrificed to get our Lotus, and then we just need to craft Enigma Jewel. Now a 6/6 Archfiend is large, and yeah, Mindstone's a little bit short of taking it out, not that we have the mana for it this turn. If I Explosion, I can also only deal 5. So what's the plan? Repurposing Bay can get a 3-drop, maybe a Thran Spider gives us more mana. So I could draw with Tome, Thran Spider, just play a tapped land. Could play Boomobile anyways, and then draw with Tome. Bay get a 5-drop, but we already have it in hand, so that doesn't work. So yeah, I guess we'll draw here, see what's up. Find another Bay. Possible, actually. Want to keep Tome to gain life next turn. So I'll just play another Bay. Surveil. Don't need Enigma Jewel. And then hope our opponent does not have the Bloodletter, which they do. So now we're taking 12. Alright, that hurts. And another Explosion, so I can gain 4 for starters. Find Synthesizer, and then I could Mightstone the Bloodletter, and then sack it to get Lotus, but then if our opponent has another Bloodletter in hand, we still die to the Archfiend. I think that still sets us up the best, as opposed to Explosion, discarding a 4-drop to deal with Bloodletter. Because now I can immediately get to Lotus. Get Lotus, and then with Lotus, I guess I could technically still cast more stuff, but if I sack all those artifacts, it's going to be a lot harder to combo with Enigma Jewel next turn. So I think we just pass and hope for the best. A Deep Cavern Bat, that's okay. That doesn't straight up kill me. And we've got plenty of removal to free whatever they steal. So now we have to start doing some math. So the goal is to craft Enigma Jewel, sacrificing as few artifacts as possible. And we also need to get Boomobile in circulation. but that's basically free when it comes to activating abilities. So, play Boommobile, make a bunch of mana. And then we want to sacrifice Lotus, Boommobile, and I guess we already have 2 things to craft with here. So that's enough. Craft Enigma Jewel. Targeting Lotus, Boommobile, 2 other things. And then now I could make a few more artifacts first. Play a chainsaw. Take out Deep Cavern Bats. Play Synthesizer. And then I want to sacrifice all of my artifacts to the Lotus. One, two, three, 4. Have to sacrifice them all at once, since we only get to activate it once per turn. And that will now get doubled to make a ton of red mana to activate our Boommobile. I guess we can mix it up. So 24 mana, exhaust, X equals 21, target my opponent, and that's 42 damage right here. Alright, nice. Glad we got to showcase the Lotus combo. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. We have a keepable hand. Some early removal, facing the red deck. Always going to be an uphill battle. And especially Screaming Nemesis is tough to beat for us. I'll keep a land. Good ways to spend our mana. Alright, just a Rockface Village activation. So for now we can Extruder it. Although the fact that they didn't have a 2-drop makes it more likely that they'll have a Screaming Nemesis. And there's no pretty way of dealing with it, since we would always end up dealing damage to it somehow. Just another Heartfire hero. So take another 3 damage. And play Spider. If they activate Village once again, Spider doesn't have a great block. Didn't think the Power Stone does much. Village is just a rat to activate. Ooh, double Swiss Spear. So this looks like a Monstrous Rage attack, which we're not upset if our opponent casts the Monstrous Rage and we get to clear the board with Explosion. If they keep Prowess cards in hand, then they might be able to save the Swiss Spear from the Explosion if we only find a 3-drop, for instance. And then I would rather have them pump Swiss Spear than a Heartfire hero. Alright, so we're hoping to draw at least a 3 mana card, so we can deal with all of the opponent's creatures. Synthesizers, potentially something we can discard. Although it would be nice to cast as well. Alright, so since we drew Enigma Jewel, it's possible this is a game where we try and set up the Lotus combo, although at 7 life against Mono Red, we probably don't have enough time to set that up, plus we'll lose 2 more here in a second. So then Synthesizer might be the fastest win condition, so then I have to discard Explosion, plus maybe a land. And then the hope is that Synthesizer making some large constructs can get there. But realistically, we're pretty dead here. And yeah, there's the Screaming Nemesis. Not a card we can really beat. Chainsaw deals 3, and then we just lose. And it's going to be a while before Maze Mine Tome gains us any life. So yeah, GG's. Can Extruders sacrifice creatures at instant speed? It can. So one thing we could technically do is figure out a way to make a creature and then block Nemesis, sacrifice it, and then we don't deal damage to it, so we don't take any damage whatsoever. But to make a creature, I would need to get Synthesizer in play first, and it doesn't make a creature upon entering. Battalion would have been a nice follow-up to a Synthesizer. But yeah, the game seems over here. GG's. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. This hand's maybe missing our Enigma Jewel to try and set up the Lotus combo with Boomobile. But I'll try. Facing black-green, maybe a graveyard deck as we see the Swarm. Alright, so the opponent's deck can potentially draw lots of cards with Up the Beanstalk and present lots of large creatures. The good news is that we're not going to give them many targets for removal, so if they're relying on those to fill the graveyard, they may not get what they want. Sadly, Extruder only deals 2 here, so probably fine to play the Vault. But yeah, the Souls of the Lost is going to get out of range from our burn spells pretty quickly. And our opponent's got a pretty nice hit with Overlord, milling several creatures. Take 5. Chainsaw's not going to get the job done either. So Synthesizer it is. And we're looking for Enigma Jewel maybe. Or we can hope that an ill-timed explosion with a Battalion can still wipe the board. Next turn if I play Boomobile I can still activate Vault at the very least. And another Overlord mills 4 more permanents, so we're taking 9. So if they have any removal here, we are dead. So play Boomobile, trigger Synthesizer, make some mana, activate Vault, and discard Extruder. And then there's nothing else I can really do here. Suppose I can still crew the Boomobile to chump if they just take out the construct. And we currently have 4 creatures in graveyard. And another Souls. So gotta play Repurposing Bay, triggering Synthesizer. Can still activate. And then at this point I could sack another Vault to get another Synthesizer. So I can maybe chump once more, or I could sack Boomobile to get our Mindstone and Weakstone, which then still lets me activate Collector's Vault. I think we get another Synthesizer, and then I'm possibly okay double chumping. But then next turn we can maybe overpower Souls of the Lost. And then I'll keep Enigma Jewel, still get to play a land for turn. And do I want another untapped land afterwards? I don't think so. Probably gonna end up searching anyway. Could have also kept a land on top and then put it in the graveyard, since we don't need to draw lands anymore. Alright, and then once again, if they do have removal, I can still crew Boomobile to survive, although that's going to put us pretty far behind. And I want Boomobile in place so I can get a 5-drop to trigger Synthesizer once more. Marauder makes us discard, and that'll draw them a card as well. So maybe ditch Chainsaw. Hopefully they don't have another one. Okay, so stick to the plan. Sacrifice Boomobile. Get Mightstone. Could also give something -5/-5, but we've got Extruder to take out Marauder, so I think we're drawing. And then now I suppose I could go Enigma Jewel and still cast Thran Spider. Trigger Synthesizer some more. And we've got a reach creature for Marauder. Alright, so we might be doing it. And then next turn, do I have enough resources to set up our Lotus combo? I'm not quite sure, but we'll try and do the math. For now, ditch another Jewel. They will get an Overlord in a second. Could take 4, since it's not like I'm going to get burnt out here. And if I trade, they've got an additional card in Graveyard to grow the team and give them more discounts. So I think it's reasonable to take it here. A Molt Tender. And then get Overlord. And drew another Boomobile. Okay, so what's our plan? I want to get Lotus by sacking Mightstone and Weakstone. So we could start there. Get some triggers. Then we want to try and craft Enigma Jewel. I can also sacrifice all my constructs here pretty much, even though an attack would be decent as well. Maybe we'll start by attacking, just to go through the motions here. Opponent takes 13. But this was just a formality. Alright, so we want to craft Enigma Jewel. Want to sack a bunch of stuff to the Lotus. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Lotus itself. And then that's probably fine for now. I guess we should actually limit the number of things we sacrifice, because we'll get more triggers once we get Enigma Jewel in play. So yeah, this is fine. Make a bunch of red. Craft Enigma Jewel. Selecting Radiant Lotus. Can go for Boomobile, of course, and then what else? Collector's Vault and a Legion Extruder, maybe. Okay. And then we want to activate our Lotus. I guess we don't need to sacrifice too much either, since it does get doubled. And then we can play another Boomobile, or just activate the one we exiled with Enigma Jewel, and that damage will also get doubled, so that can just burn the opponent out here. But yeah, we could have made a lot more mana by sacking even more artifacts to the Jewel. But yeah, that'll do it. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw here. Got a fine hand with early removal and then double synthesizer. Facing turn 1 plains, so it could be a white tokens deck. Radiant Lotus, happy to have in the graveyard for an eventual Enigma Jewel that we can craft. Opponent's blue-white. So looks like the Omniscience combo deck, and yeah, they already milled Omniscience. So if they have Abuela's Awakening, they can combo off. I guess Torture Tower can still take out the 1/1 Omniscience. But yeah, this seems like a tough matchup. Don't have any counter spells really, which is what we would need. And if I want to tap out for Synthesizer, we don't get to keep up Torture Tower. Although I guess there's also a counter spell in hand. So, don't see myself winning this game very often. The opponent's plan is to get back Omniscience, and then they've got the blue Invasion at 5 mana that can get cards out of the sideboards, and then our opponent's basically gonna set up an infinite loop to win the game. For now, Archaeologist, so Opponent already has the Invasion of Arcavios, so if they have Abuel's Awakening in hand, we pretty much lose if we tap out here. But I think I still have to go for it, since passing the turn and having our opponent play their counterspells also not going to be putting us in a winning position. So now Mightstone, probably fine to have in the deck to find with Repurposing Bay. Thran Spider triggers Synthesizer, but don't know if that's what we want. It is fine, since we can also sack it to Repurposing Bay eventually, assuming the game lasts that long. So maybe I will still keep it, since we have a couple more land drops in hand. But yeah, let's see if they have the Awakening. Yeah, so we are dead. But we'll let our opponent go through the motions, so you get to see this combo in action. So with Omniscience, they can cast all their spells for free from hand. Invasion got Besiege the Mirror, which can get another Invasion, which then gets this town in big enough, which can then bounce both invasions back to hand. And then our opponent can keep getting back this town in big enough while getting more cards out of the sideboard. And eventually one of those will be a win condition, like Breach the Multiverse, which can just mill us to death. Since it can, this town in big enough, get back double invasion, getting back Breach, getting back this town in big enough, and eventually mill us to death. So, game is very much over. So yeah, had I kept up Torture Tower, I would have had a small window to take out the Omniscience. Our opponent still would have cast the Invasion for free. But as I said, given the opponent's hand, we just had to hope they didn't have it. But yeah, 29 cards remain. Opponent can mill us with Jace, get Jace back with Breach, and that's already game. And nothing I can really do in my upkeep. So yeah, turn 4 win. That's the power of this Omniscience combo deck when it goes off. Four cards remain, opponent gets back Jace, and Jace can do the honors. Double Skitter Beam can also hit us for 8. Not too many other creatures in our deck. Alright, GG's. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, and we've got a Keeper. Can maybe hold Battalion to trigger Synthesizer twice, but it's also a great card to discard to an Explosion, so we can deal 9 damage to everything. Opponent's not presenting any creatures yet. So if they're holding a bunch of spot removal, curving Synthesizer into Battalion's pretty good. And yeah, let's go ahead and play the first copy. Can play another one next turn. And Mono Black's not gonna have answers for artifacts specifically, so this should be a decent matchup. Well, third Synthesizer might be overkill, but yeah, I mean, seems fine. We have removal, so then just making a million constructs seems fine. Alright, Archfiends. That one hits pretty hard, to be fair. So we could cast the Explosion, but then I would have to get rid of the Battalion. So I think I'm still in favor of Synthesizer. And then still want land 5. And then next turn we can reevaluate. If they play Bloodletter, we would take 12 here, so that would hurt. But it looks like just an attack for 6. And another Archfiends, okay. So now, casting Explosions may be the safer play, although we give up on potentially an awesome battalion turn. If I play battalion now, we would get, let's see here, 6 construct tokens, in addition to our 3 battalions. So that's 9 additional artifacts. This goes up to 12, so it's not quite forcing the opponent to jump. Yeah, I think I need to cast the explosion, unfortunately. And then I have to get rid of battalion, and at this point maybe Torch the Tower can go, since I can double spell 3 drops next turn. Suppose I could have tried to attack first. Opponent passes. Well, if it ain't broke. Play another synthesizer. And how about number 4? For now, play Spider. So even if they have a cover-up to wipe the board next turn, we'll have more ways to trigger synthesizer. And that's a lot of tokens. But yeah, casting battalion would have been pretty sweet. But sometimes you gotta be responsible and make sure you don't die. Sheoldred's Edict gets her only non-token. So yeah, their removal didn't really line up with this particular sequence. And we have more than enough to cross the finish line. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. We get to curve Thran Spider into Mightstone and Weakstone, but that feels a little too slow, especially on the draw. This is a little bit better. Turn 2 Extruder, turn 3 Synthesizer, setting up a Repurposing Bay. Facing the Pixie deck. We'll see if it's Blue, Black, or Esper. Radiant Lotus. Probably not something I need right this second, and we can still potentially use Enigma Jewel to craft it. So our opponent getting back the talent. So if we can find our sweeper, that can help stabilize. For now, take out Pixie. And then still looking at Synthesizer into Repurposing Bay. Fear of Isolation, pick up Talent, and replay it. So they are going quite wide. So we can try and scry into our sweeper here as well. Chainsaw, Torch the Tower. Yeah, I mean, those are options. If I keep Torch, I could cast it alongside Repurposing Bay, potentially cast it with Bargain, sacking the Extruder. And then Chainsaw can take out an Otter. We can also maybe combine it with Repurposing Bay. Because yeah, if we play Bay plus Torch, then the turn after I can play Mightstone, triggering Synthesizer, and activate the Repurposing Bay at once. So that could be a decent sequence. Although, I guess we don't have our Lotus to fetch up, so then I would need our 2-drop to get a 3-drop, so I don't want to sack it to Torch the Tower. But I think this still makes sense. And this way we're not relying on just top-decking our sweeper to bail us out, but we could easily die in the meantime. Another talent. So we're taking 8. Do you have another non-creature spell? Yeah, it looks like this town ain't big enough, so we're probably just dead here. If we can't make constructs, we can't stabilize. So then I might have been better off bottoming both and hoping to top deck ill-timed explosion, but yeah, I think we're just dead right now, in fact. So yeah, sometimes the Pixie deck doesn't need any discard spells, just all token makers and prowess triggers. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a fine hand. Get to chainsaw on 2. And then line 4 is fine, setting up our explosion. Possible this hand could have played out better on the draw, where chainsaw can get a 2-drop. Now I don't really want to cast it without any targets. But then we'll miss out on an artifact we can maybe sack to the bay. Opponent black-green, looks like a mid-range deck. And red knight draws. Okay. We're happy playing a longer grindy game. Start with Synthesizer, hope they don't have an answer like Maelstrom Pulse. And I'll keep another one on top. And yeah, if they have Maelstrom Pulse specifically, they could blow up 2 Synthesizers at once. The rest can take away our explosion, but luckily they cannot take away the card on the top of my deck. The old adage, can't Thoughtseize the top of the deck. Alright, so Thran Spider seems great here. Another Dread Knight to draw. Now there have been more recent builds of Golgari playing Phyrexian Obliterator, and that card specifically is pretty good against us since all our removal is damage based, and we do see a lot of swamps in the opponent's mana base, so if they go Obliterator into Bushwhack, that's kind of the one-hit KO. But for now, we'll play Spider, and we can chainsaw the Dread Knights if we'd like. And we can always just draw 2 with the explosion. But yeah, no Phyrexian Obliterator to save the day. Alright, so we got to see this very interesting blue-red artifact combo deck in action. A slightly different take on the usual Synthesizer artifact decks, even though Synthesizer still ends up being our win condition more often than not. But it's nice to have that combo angle that can maybe beat decks that have lots of board wipes to keep the board clear of all your constructs. And then taking a look at our achievements, we also unlocked the one-shot achievement, dealing 20 or more non-combat damage to a player in a single turn. So, good for doing your achievements as well. I'm sure we've got some other ones here. Win a game on the same turn where we sacrifice 6 or more permanents. And then cast 300 artifacts we've also unlocked in the meantime. So yeah, if you're a fan of artifact combo decks, maybe give this one a try. But for now, I want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.